Welcome everyone, and welcome to this Congress training. This is an opportunity for us to speak about our experiences of Congress, to help prepare the new people that are coming to Congress for the first time. It can be a bit daunting, and so this is a way of preparing people for that. But also too, for those people who have been in the past, to get the most out of Congress and how you can participate to so that you can actually fulfil your role as being a representative at Congress. So my name is Richard Chalklen. I'm an educator for the PSA, and my panel today is
Paula Davis. I'm a co-convener of the Public Service Sector.
And Athol Ringrose. I'm also a co-convener of the Public Service Sector.
So what we're going to do today, this goes in combination with the handout, which you may have in front of you. And we're going to do this just by a conversation around a whole lot of questions that you'll be confronted with by attending Congress. So putting it out to the team here first up. So what is Congress, and how does Congress fit within the governance of the PSA?
Well, to me, thank you. So Congress is the highest form of our organisation, right? It is the pinnacle of the PSA. That's where we all come together and decide the future for the next 2 years of our union.
Yeah, it's a representative thing where delegates from all around the country, as you say, come together from across all of the sectors to both make decisions about the rules and regulations and operating of the PSA, and also going through to elect the president, again setting the two-year framework, and making sure that it's the checks and balances for our organisation and representing our members.
PSA is a member-led organisation, and we do have delegates at the heart of our PSA to represent our members there. We are a large organisation, over 70,000 members out there. We're a very diverse organisation, and so how do we make a large organisation work? And Congress is that bit of democracy that actually gives substance to how we make decisions and where we go. Thank you very much for that. So, you've both been to Congress before?
Yes.
What typically happens at Congress?
Oh, wow. There's a bunch of standing orders which are really there just to keep us on track and so on. But we have a couple of workshops where our delegates who attend from all across the sectors, as I said before, come together and actually figure out some stuff so that they can both influence the direction of the PSA for future and take it back to their members on sites, so that there's that two-way communication. But also we've got the reading of rules and regulation changes, which go out for a vote for the people who attend, and we'll keep to how our members can feed into that shortly. But also there's the election of the president, the confirmation of the finances for the previous year, a whole lot of notices of stuff that come up, messages, information. Paula, what else?
Well, it's also fun. I thought I'd put that in
Oh yeah,
there.
it's not all business.
It's not all business, but there is a lot of business. It's both serious, but then it's that one time of actually for 2 years that we all get to come together as all sectors, tirunanga, and all of our networks. It's one time that we all get to come together and meet each other and share that kōrero and share that knowledge. But yes, it's also business.
Yeah, it's a lot of business.
For myself, I quite like it because the PSA is an organisation. Our goal is to go out there and to influence the way that work happens in New Zealand, and because we are a large organisation, people actually want to talk to us, and so we attract the MPs, the want-to-be Prime Ministers, the key ministers that are out there and the key people in the community to come and talk to us. And so we've had some really dynamic guest speakers talking about work, the future of work, and how it impinges upon our our mahi, right down to our members' experiences in the workplace. So it is a dynamic forum to them. And as part of that, we have workshops and we have plenary sessions, to make that all happen. So, how do our delegates get selected to come to Congress? So,
Well, I was actually involved in the public service sector delegation selection panel this year, where when we as PSA we put out an email fairly early on in March, which went out to all of our delegates in the public service and in each of the sectors as well, and said please put in an expression of interest. And from that, each sector committee has a defined number of delegates who can attend, and it's based on the size of the sector. It's factored under the rules as 1 per 500 or part thereof for membership. So for ours it was 58 delegates who could attend. That included different specified seats, but from that we took those expressions of interest and we narrowed it down by the demographics of our sector, so making sure that we had the right balance of women, the right balances of the networks, ethnicity, so make sure we've got enough Māori attendees, enough Pacifica attendees, so that it matches fairly closely, because when you get down to 0.3 of a person, it's a bit tricky to say, do we count this person in that group or that group? But yeah, so we went through all of that, and because this year Congress has moved dates, we've had some of those people who we'd originally selected have pulled out, and so we have some reserves, again, that if someone in this group, that's one of those ones.
There's also a geographical spread,
Yes.
which is always making sure that you've got somebody from everywhere and it's just not centred on one place. And I think you also go for a mix of old and new, so that you've got people that are experienced, but of course with succession planning more and bring new people in.
Yeah, you're right. We definitely don't try and, for the public service, everyone thinks it's in Wellington and that's it.
Yeah.
But we have members and agencies that are based right out in the regions. And when they put in an EOI, we want them to also be considered. I think our spread is pretty good this year. We've done quite well with our selection, even if I do say so myself.
and I suppose that's a hard choice to make.
It's
and
very
because
tricky.
people would express their interest, and so you're looking at what they are also bringing, not only who they represent.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one of the questions is, what's your interest? Why do you want to? What would this be helpful for you, for your organisation, for you representing your members in your site and in your organisation? And so we had to make some really hard calls, because I'd say of the roughly 150 expressions we get each time, 150 of them are really good candidates.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to narrow it down to just the 55, 58 that we can pick.
Next one really is a question for myself. Do the PSA staff normally come to Congress? And the answer is no, they don't, because it's a delegates Congress. And so the staff that do go are really only then to support how Congress takes place, or to support the various committees that are there, as well as those key staff that need to be there to give the right information. So our national secretaries will be there because they are part of the executive board in there. Our finance team will be there because they'll be presenting the accounts in there. Our media team will be there to make sure that it all happens the way it's supposed to happen. And so it's not so much a staff conference, it is a delegates conference in that space. So, I'm a new delegate.
Hi, Richard, the new delegate.
Coming to Congress. What is it that I can expect in that space,
Luckily, everything is pretty much handed to you, I find. There's always a good pack that they give to you, and it has a timeline of everything that has to occur. And so the best thing you can do is participate and engage. So that's both with the people that you're sitting with, but also with what's happening. It's really just about attending and taking part in everything, in the workshops, and talking to people, and learning as much as you can about our union.
Yeah, I have to say, the first time I went to Congress, I wasn't well prepared. And that came down to the fact that I was between houses and all sorts of stuff, so I didn't get that pack of information and papers to prepare me for, and I was a bit isolated from the goings on. But since then, and having gone to that first Congress, I've become so much more involved and engaged in what actually happens within PSA, and that's right through the structures.
Do people just come because this is a junket, this is a nice holiday out for a couple of days?
I wish. It's hard work in this year it's 3 days.
Yeah.
Usually it's 2 days, and it's a lot of work. As we said before, it's a lot of business, and it is fun. We do have our collected dinner together on the second night this year, where it's social time, where you can get to know the other attendees in their real person activity, as opposed to their I'm a delegate and this is all business kind of stuff.
But it's a lot of work.
There is a lot of
if you were at work.
Oh yeah, I definitely wouldn't say it's a holiday at all.
And if you come to it thinking that it is, don't worry, we'll show you the way.
Yeah.
So I see there's guest speakers there and there's workshops there. Will I be expected to speak and ask questions in front of Congress?
I wouldn't say you're expected to, but there are opportunities to if you think it is required, and especially if you think that it is reflective of your members' voice.
Yeah. We certainly have the question and answer sessions with all of the guest speakers, and with the plenaries, the rules, regulations, the notice of motions about changes of rules. You have the opportunity that if you feel strongly, the microphone comes round the room and it's like, we've got a comment over here, it's like, I'm speaking for it and my name is, and or I'm speaking against it, because that's the whole point. We're allowed and encouraged to talk about how something's going to impact our area of representation.
But if you're worried about public speaking, don't worry, we're not going to make you give a speech.
Yeah, not everyone has to, definitely not. And you can always go to your mate and go, hey Richard, I'm a bit scared to speak publicly, can you say this thing on my behalf? And it's all right.
Yeah.
And there are various forums in which you can make your contribution. Each of the sectors have their own caucuses where they'll get together. The Runanga has their own caucus where they get together, and I dare say the networks will have their own get-togethers there, as well as the large plenary sessions there. So there's over 200 people attending Congress, so it is a big affair, and so that can be daunting, asking or speaking out in public. So, yeah. Well, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Right, so I've heard that Congress is about the rules, it's about the regulations, the remits, the standing orders, the technical stuff. Why do we need that technical stuff?
Well, it keeps us, I mean, the technical stuff, particularly around the standing orders, that's to keep us on track, and that's in the handout, the standing order stuff, so that's really good. Thanks for putting that in, Richard, because if you don't understand that the structure of what we do, how we do it, making sure that when we're talking about something, we're talking about it so that we can set our whole organisation's agenda, our whole union's agenda for the next 2 years.
And the rules are really a safety mechanism for all of us, and especially as delegates, it's something that rule book is it's really important to know about, and it's really important to become acquainted with. If you're not already, have a look, it's online, and then you can compare as to what the notices of motion are about and why we're changing them, or why people are seeking for amendments.
So the PSA is an incorporated society, and as such they've got to have some rules which govern how they do business. It outlines who they are, what their purpose is, the duties of the various officers, the roles that members play, the roles that delegates play. So it's how we organise ourselves so that we are held accountable for how we behave. When we come to Congress, then if we're wanting to change those rules, then we have to put notices of motion, or what we call remits, in. so that we can change the way that we do business. How we actually do business on the day is what we call our standing orders, and they outline how we vote, how we take care of business at the Congress, how we manage conflict and disputes there, the authority that the President has to run Congress. So that's outlined in those standing orders. The delegates' role, the people that come to Congress, they are there to represent their sector or their cluster or their network or who their bodies are that they represent. How do they talk? How do they know who they represent? How do they talk to the people that they represent?
Well, part of that is through that selection process with the expressions of interest, because we don't just pluck delegates from nowhere or everywhere in the organisation. It's someone who wants to come, so they've made an effort to be involved and be engaged. What we're doing this year, which is a little bit different, is we're going to put up our delegation, the people we have selected, onto our webpage, so that those of our members and delegates who are out there, who are not selected, not part of the delegation, know who to contact. And we've got within the public service sector groups where we have specific agencies who are represented on this committee, but also sectors who are clustered, where there are 5 or 6 or even 10 agencies with one representative coming to Congress this year. So knowing that's the person who I need to put my feedback in, and we certainly recommend any agency where we've got delegate networks and enterprise delegates, enterprise committees, to discuss these things before the time so that they can put it through to us.
Yeah, you don't go to Congress just, oh, I read that, I don't like that, oh, I'll give my opinion on that. As a delegate, obviously, you represent a large amount of people. We have 200 people coming to Congress, representing 70,000 people behind us. So it is your job as a attendee of Congress to engage with your members. And so if you find out who your representative is or representatives, go have a talk with them, go have a chat and say, oh, what do you think about this? Is that good for us? How will that impact us? And have that talk, because that's the most important thing.
When I was part of a sector committee, I found it really frustrating because I was a cluster representative, and trying to actually contact my cluster and get them to talk to me is quite difficult at times. Similar is difficult for the Runanga representatives as well, because they represent the Māori in that sector as well. Have you got any advice to give to those people who work in a cluster, how to actually contact or get that information back from them?
Yeah, luckily we've started working on our clusters here in our sector and making sure, so what that is a small organisation, and we need to make sure that we get the small organisation views, not just the big places. We never want to be overrun. And so it is really about connecting through to those people. What Athol suggested by naming your representatives, that's a way that you can actually go and have a look at the website and see who they are. And just usually you can find out their email address. It's usually email address at agency.
Yeah. Usually it is. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what you do. You just contact them and see how it goes.
Yeah, and we're trying to make it more visible this time, so that our delegates out there can.
Yeah.
You raised the point about your opinion, what your sector is saying. What happens if they are not the same? How do you manage your view as opposed to their view?
That's a really difficult one. Especially this is a democratic organisation, and we don't as a sector say, you must do this, you must vote this way. We don't necessarily...
And that's, the block voting, that's specifically excluded. You're not allowed to do it under the rules.
Yeah. But you do have to, you as a delegate have to sit there within yourself and wonder if you have, and check that you have actually represented the people that you represent. So if you have the kōrero with everyone and everyone disagrees with you, then maybe you might be on the wrong side there. But at the end of the day, you're there to represent up to 70,000 people. And you have to take that as, you know, there's a mana there and there's an importance there, and you have to respect that.
Sometimes you'll be talking about issues and you'll have information which you didn't have before Congress, and so when it does come to that, it is your vote on the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Taking into account all of the information that your membership or your constituency has given you. Yeah, and so that is quite a responsible position to be in.
Highly responsible. I mean, it's one of those ones that you don't go to Congress to have a holiday, which we talked about before. You go to represent the people who have sent you there. You go with the people who are behind you.
And I just want to point out, just other delegates have told me just how inspiring that is. Just how inspiring, what an inspirational place it is, and how they can feel the 70,000 people with them. So yeah, it's actually a great opportunity.
So with the business that comes up, the notices of motion or the remits that are there, how are the remits formed? How did they come to get to Congress?
Well, that's, again, there's a special process that goes with how that works, and it's under the rules. But with the notice of the Congress being held, as it goes out, also with that is the process for electing the president. So the first expressions of interest for that go through, and they must be through the sector committees. With the notices of motion, the remits, is where a particular rule or a particular policy within PSA's rules and regulations either doesn't work, or if it does work, it needs to have a little bit of a tweak to make it work better, or that it does work, but it needs adding to. And sometimes we just don't have a rule about something. And so over the 2 years prior to that point, which is preceding the previous Congress, we talk about it at our sector committee, but also our members and delegates often tell us, hey, there's this thing in the rules, because everyone reads the rules, right? that doesn't really work, or how does this apply in our situation? And so we spend a lot of that time actually going through and figuring out, what could this look like? Does it actually apply? Does it work? It just needs the information to make it work. Or does it actually need to change? And so we spend a lot of time putting that together, and one of the calls at the 6 months out from a Congress is, have you got any? And they've got to come through the sector committees.
And they often start even in the national delegate level, right, at the enterprise delegate structure level, where and so there's the representatives at this committee have found them, and then they bring them here.
So you've both been to Congress before, and my first Congress was way back in 2000. What sorts of remits have you experienced coming before Congress? What stands out in your minds?
So I remember the youth remit last time was very important, and that was about making sure that we had our youth, our rangatahi, our people under 36, represented at all levels of PSA. And obviously that's so important in terms of succession and bringing our young people with us on board.
So I've been to the 2018, which was the Youth Participation Congress, where that was the biggest set of rule changes around. I went to the 2016 one, which was where we spent a bit of time narrowing down the Rule 5, the gender equity rule, which talks about the balance of women on our governance structures through the sector committees and through the executive board. And that was about the date that came into effect, how it applied, which levels it applied, all of that stuff was up for debate. And it was a really big Congress year.
And there's robust debate, right? And that's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. I didn't get on the mic, but I watched other people get on it. It was a lot of fun.
And particularly with the gender one, it's because a lot of our constituency, how the public service is made up, is women. Women are up to, I think, 70% of public service. Some it's even higher in some of the sectors.
Yeah.
That should be, Congress said that action should be reflected in the decision-making bodies, the governance structures of our union. And so the changes to the rules reflected that, as
right.
opposed to choosing who might be the best person, because sometimes that might be not gender orientated. I can remember myself back in 2010 where we looked at the way that government was doing business and the way that our sectors were set up, and we were set up mainly around sort of occupational based, or the way that our organisations do business, and that's not the way that government do business. And that's why we formed the state sector, the public service, the DHB sectors, the local government and the community sector. It's interesting though, coming into the future and in congresses to come, because the public service is now changing.
That's right.
And so I can expect probably into the future those sectors being tweaked or changed, because the world out there is changing as well. So
more than likely, I mean that is a rule change for PSA to consider, but because of the timing of the Public Service Act and the changes to the state sector, that's going to have to be something for the next Congress.
Yeah.
So we, like we were saying before, we know there's more things to do. It's just about timing.
So the remits are there, they've been circulated, and I think they get published in the PSA Journal, Working Life. Otherwise they'll get sent out to the people there. The nominations for president are out there. This year we've got a healthy crop.
We do, five candidates this year.
There. Are you going to have time in your sectors and the runanga and the networks to actually talk about and to discuss those remits and the nominations for president?
Just note that before Congress we have hui taumata for te runanga, and that is built as the opportunity to talk about the remits and how they affect our Māori members of the organisation. And so there are opportunities before Congress to do so. However, obviously we require time at Congress, and so you do have all those breakout times where you can discuss and ask questions as a sector, as te runanga, and even in your networks.
Yeah, and one of the big things on day one is to actually get together as that group, whichever one it is, and talk through those candidates, their profiles, what information's come out since, what you know about them, each of the remits, and understanding, because frequently you might have an understanding, or the people who have sent you feedback might have had an understanding of what that notice looks like and what it really means. But once you have those conversations, it starts to become clearer, and of course on the day when that particular notice is up, you can put up a change that says, actually we just want to tweak the wording a tiny bit because it's this. And that's good, because it's that healthy debate stuff.
A couple of questions related to that. How do you vote then at Congress? You know, is it consensus? Is it show of hands?
We have the rule of the 50% plus one. So of the people who are in the room, and we'll go there 200 people, just for numbers, 50% of that's 100 people, plus one means it's 101. It's the pure democracy minimum requirements. Now most of the time it's almost consensus, if not consensus, because as the Congress, as the delegates who are there, it's either by show of hands, and it's those who are voting for, those who are voting against, those who are abstaining, and you have the opportunity to do that. And of course, if it shows that it's really close, then we might have to do that voting via a tag, where you hand the tag to someone who is acting as a scrutineer, so that they can make sure, because if it's really close, and it can be sometimes, that we get those numbers right.
Yeah.
So how does the voting for president work? Because that's slightly different, isn't it? Because you've got multiple people there. You don't just vote for the one that you feel is going to be the best president. They do it by elimination, don't they?
Yeah. So it's about the 50% plus one. But when you've got lots of candidates, you have to do multiple rounds of voting. The first round is if none of the candidates has reached that threshold, which is the minimum threshold to pass, then the lowest voted candidate falls off
Right.
the ballot. And then you do another round of voting, and if, so again, someone doesn't reach that 50% plus one of all the votes received, then the lowest one falls off. And we've had in the past a number of rounds of voting to take it to that point. And that just shows that there is a very wide representative within those candidates. So if it takes a bit, and we don't do it by that transferable vote where you rank them 1 to 5 or whatever, and we don't do it that way because we want to make sure that it is a pure outcome.
Runanga or sector mangai reps to Congress, it's a double whammy for them because they wear several hats, don't they?
Yeah.
They're both part of a sector, but they're also part of the runanga of the PSA. How do they manage that? Because they have their own separate meetings and sometimes they've got to be at 2 places at the same
They
time. How does that
Luckily,
work?
they shapeshift and can be in 2 separate places at the same time. For example, what usually happens is Te Runanga sit at their own table with our kuia and kaumātua, as opposed to with their sector. But I'm sure there's room for them to sit at both if need be, especially when they need to be with their sector, right? But effectively, they wear 2 hats if you are a sector mangai. And so you do have to look at everything with that lens when you are looking at a remit, when you are looking at how you vote. But really, yes, they do wear 2 hats and have to consider a lot of things.
So that's great. We've been through Congress and it's been a wonderful experience and I've come back all fired up and everything else. What do I do with this? How do I go back and tell the stories? You know, how do I communicate with my sector, my constituency after Congress?
Well, it's really easy to do in your own site, right? And if you are an enterprise committee delegate, so like for public service, it's a national delegate. But if you're at that level, you go and you spend some time the next time you have a meeting of your other delegates and you talk to them and you say, this is what we went through. And you run through similar to questions like we've just done, is to say, these are what it's like. And of course, encourage our next group to put their name forward next time.
Yeah. And we changed, you might say we changed this part of the PSA rules for this reason, and there's a reason why you changed it because it will make everything better. So yeah, it is a great time afterwards to really get engagement with your members and with your fellow delegates, and maybe that might be a chance for you to look at your delegate career and maybe take that next step in the delegate.
Yep, stand for president next time.
Yeah.
So, just sort of wrapping up then, what other sorts of messages would you like to tell your delegates that are going to Congress about your experiences there?
It's an experience that you can't really repeat anywhere else. You don't get in PSA any other opportunities to have that kind of engagement with people from such a broad grouping, except for delegate education. And even then, often it's quite narrow and you're talking with usually quite new delegates, whereas this is that group of older and newer, more experienced or less experienced people, and you just don't get that opportunity.
You know what it is? It's those emails that you get with delegate names on it, and oh my gosh, that's you, and oh my gosh, that's you. That's the best part of it. You meet other people just like you who might be a little bit nerdy about PSA stuff, and they're your people. These are your people, and you get to start up those relationships and friendships and those connections that will take you and help you in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely network building, eh?
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much for sharing your experiences,
Thank you.
and I wish you all the best for Congress.
Right. Thanks very much, Richard.